Thank you very much. Welcome back to the program. 5 minutes past the hour, the halftime festivities. Oh, my goodness. Just a delightful halftime show. And this program, as you know, we're in our 25th season now, brought to us by Chuck Malamut, who leads his group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office. And this following program that you will listen to and learn as Chuck tells us all about our financial matters, brought to us by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this program are those of Chuck and do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast and are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Chuck Malamut. Good morning,
Harry.
Great to see you.
I see we have the Harry Hurley Way sign
right
behind you.
They were so kind that they put the official one up, and they gave, as you were there, so you know, they gave us one that we could bring into the studio. Show's very nice, I think.
Is that the replacements for when the first one comes down?
It's not coming down.
Because when some of your fans put the...
I'm hitting the dump button. Don't give anybody any crazy ideas. I want it to stay beautiful for decades to come.
Harry, how were you thinking what I was going to say?
Because I know you for 40 years.
There we go. So good morning, Harry.
Greece.
The world, it's amazing. This is now, after July 4th weekend, one would expect to have a rather quiet summer.
Right.
And that's what we have become accustomed to. And where we are now, between Greece, China, the ever-looming price of oil, obviously, following Carlo, I've known Carlo for a lifetime, the plight of Atlantic City and Atlantic County. I mean, there's a lot going on right now.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, he is no fool. There's no doubt about it. Chuck, let me say, in terms of, think about this. I used to think that bad news had shelf life. I'm convinced now that bad news has a one-day shelf life in this sort of attention deficit disorder society that we now all reside. Think about this. I mean, Greece did exactly what I predicted on your show, Chuck, because I know all I have to do is study an issue, and I know how they're going to vote because they want to keep it the way it is. So, of course, they were going to vote no. You have the world leaning on Greece saying, look, we're not bailing you out again if you don't do certain things. Well, they voted no anyhow. So the finance minister's gone. Our markets take a hit for one day. I did my homework before your show. The futures are up already.
Well, Harry,
it's like a one-day event.
No, our market did not feel the effects that happened, throughout the rest of the world. I think what was I don't want to use the word discouraging, on Sunday night at 8 p.m., after the vote was counted, here 8 p.m. here in the U.S., two of the financial market stations ran a 1-hour special about the plight of Greece. So you think about, and this is, I think, a pretty good segue as to, the negative media that you guys had chatted about over the last hour or so. This was full face in front of you as to, getting investors very, very anxious and trying to create something maybe that's a little bit more than it really was or is. That's not to say, Harry, that, a country that controls 2% of the GDP of the Eurozone is not a big deal. But this has been pretty much a rewrite of what we have seen and have heard about. So, and to make things even worse, now the reports coming out of Greece are there was a lot of confusion with respect to the vote, and somebody that actually wanted to stay in the Eurozone misread the question and voted the wrong way. So now we're looking, saying, okay, it was 61-39%, I think is the way the vote went. And so
that's correct.
Overwhelming that it went the way it did. But now imagine you can't go to the ATM. You cannot collect your pension. And if you look at the population base, from what I'm seeing and reading and listening to, is that the younger generation voted no, or voted to exit, and the older generation, those that are on the pensions, decided to vote the same way. And now, if you have confusion amongst the ranks, that is also going to create problems. So now, all right. So now we are faced with.
But here's the deal, though, Chuck. Greece has money for 2 days.
They do, yes.
We'll put the cards on the table in a gaming town face up. Greece has money for 2 days. So, look, I'm just your protege. I'm not Mr. Big. I'm just your protege. I do know this, though. There will be a deal within 2 days.
Look, so you've had 5 here. There has to be some kind of a deal, and when you take we don't know what the deal is going to be, and I'm not quite certain that the deal that they're going to be negotiating now is going to be better than the deal that was offered to them before.
Could be worse.
It could be. It could be absolutely worse. And the austerity programs that were in place were done for a reason. Harry, 90% of the people in Greece right now are not paying taxes. 90. So if you do not have 25% unemployment within the country, so
they should come here and figure out how they report the numbers. They could make it 5.3% tomorrow. Get on that. Come on, Greece.
Harry, I don't think it's quite like that, but maybe they could take a lesson out of the U.S. books. But the problem.
I want to know how we have the lowest participation work rate in history, and we have 5.3% unemployment. But I digress.
We'll save that. We'll save that for later in the discussion.
So, do you agree with your little brother, Harry, that there will be a deal within 2 days?
I think, Harry, there has to be some kind of a deal put in place relatively soon. Because if not, I mean, they're meeting tonight. If not, there's now you have a country that has virtually fallen face first. There is no economy to speak of. Why would you, as a traveler, even consider at this point in time, in the next relatively short period of time, looking to travel to Greece?
You'd be afraid to. You can't operate.
So their number one industry is
vacations and things.
Is tourism.
Yeah.
So now you're looking at tourism as being in a very, very difficult spot. And I'm not quite certain that the resolution is going to be more of the same. Unfortunately, do you need to kick that can down the road? If so, to what extent?
Could this end with them actually leaving the euro?
It could.
Which would really they're an island all to their own, literally. And I mean, you talk about problems then. They'd have nobody bailing them out.
Yeah, so now we're at the point where
Chuck, by the way, just tell our listeners why it's so important to keep bailing Greece out.
Harry, why it's important for we want to keep the stability of the Eurozone, and the fact of the matter is that exiting the euro, we don't know what the results are going to be because it's no one has done that before previously. But I think most importantly, and here's where I think a lot, and this is where the American markets, U.S. domestic equities yesterday proved themselves. We opened up, we went to bed on Sunday night as the Chinese market was getting absolutely hammered, and that's a discussion we need to have as well today. The contagion carried over into Hong Kong, and then spread as they were celebrating. Imagine celebrating on the streets in Greece, in Athens, because the way you voted, went the way you thought it was going to go. So
they were whistling to the graveyard. It was incredible to see them celebrate their own ruination.
Banks have been closed for days. The stock market has been closed. It might open later this week. That thing carried across the pond into the U.S. Mm-hmm. And as we opened up, we were down about 200 points in the Dow. We recovered, and we were down just ever so slightly at the end of the day. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, the futures this morning are up the Dow futures up about 50. So what is happening at this point in time, and I think so many of us really are spending way too much time focusing on Greece because it's a headline, and have totally lost sight of what's going on in China and Puerto Rico, because I think that is certainly more important to the financial markets versus a rewrite as to what we have seen over the last several years, coming out of Greece. So now you're down to the wire. The prime minister, does he come hat in hand back, into this meeting that's called for today? And, the creditors, are going to come back and say, wait a minute, your terms are not acceptable to us, as a for instance. So what would be the next steps at that point in time?
And, Chuck, I want to talk about something much more important than Greece right now. I want to talk about that.
Harry, I have to tell you that
I'm showing Chuck a picture of me in perfect hold with my daughter. I practiced, Chuck.
Harry, I think you probably had a practice for a good month or so.
Oh, I did.
Would you practice with Margie or did you practice with your daughter?
No, this is the truth. No, Lauren and I only did a couple things. You saw we did a couple of moves. Here's the true story. 34 years ago, this October 17th, I could not dance a lick. I didn't like to dance. I didn't want to dance. I was actually stressed out waiting for the point in time where you have to do the first dance. And I faked my way through it. Margie's a great dancer. I couldn't dance at all. About 6 weeks ago, I went online and I found a basic sort of slow dance, little instructional type video. And this is the true story. I get in here usually first out of everybody that's here in the morning. And if anybody walked by while I was doing it, it would have been hilarious because I turned the video on, probably did it about 20 times, 30 times over the course of 4 to 6 weeks. And I learned how to do proper hold, but it was air, dancing because I didn't have a partner. And I learned a basic two-step and a couple little moves. And a friend of Margie who's a professional, a friend of Lauren's, who's a professional dancer, Marie Jo, showed me a couple of moves. And actually, a couple of people told me, Harry, I didn't know you could dance. I pulled off the dance, Chuck.
Harry, I was not one of them that said you couldn't dance because I think you did a fine job.
No, you didn't say I couldn't dance, but
you didn't ask me, so I didn't tell you.
I'm saying I couldn't.
No, but it was Harry. I was so happy to be there.
But look at the hold, Chuck. Look at the hold.
Yes, the hold is
elbow,
there, Harry.
It's just firm. Hand where it belongs.
It's all that athletic ability that you've acquired over the years.
And I will say, I'm not kidding you. I love Dancing with the Stars. I'm not afraid to admit I love Lifetime movies. I don't have a chance to watch them very much anymore, but I love them. And I love Dancing with the Stars. And I was just channeling my own Len Goodman, Anaba, and Tom Yoli, and Julianne Hough. And I pulled off a beautiful father-daughter
Harry,
dance.
how did we end? I don't get the segue. We were talking about Greece, and now we're talking about the way you dance.
Here was the segue. I said, I want to talk about something really important, not Greece anymore. And I went,
right,
that.
There we go.
And I held up the H phone.
All right. I thought you were going to show me a flag of China.
No.
Okay.
No. Not at all. But, Chuck, I want to thank you for being at Lauren's wedding. Was the reason I also brought it up.
Thank you for inviting us. It was great to be there. So now
back to your show.
So now we go to this. Do you go hat in hand, the Greek prime minister, or does he go and say, here's what we're going to do, like it or too bad?
Well, look at it this way. Where's the last prime minister?
Gone.
Yeah, he's gone. So I think it's fair to say the new prime minister won't be like the last prime minister. The new prime minister comes in and knows that a deal has to be made. I don't think there's any question whether you're somebody that supports keeping things the way that they are or someone, who was basically ordering that you have to change the way that you do business. It cannot stay the way that it is. And obviously they have to reopen as a nation. They're basically shut down as we speak. So within 2 days, if they had a week's worth of cash, they'd have a week. They have 2 days worth of cash. We're going to have a deal by Thursday. And I say maybe even tomorrow.
So now you've had 5 years of this crisis that Greece has lived through. and now you're going back to the 18 different leaders, asking them for another bailout, and so now the plan that the Greeks, as the voters rejected the austerity terms of a bailout because I guess, and maybe it goes back to the fact that, Harry, you have 25% unemployment and 90% of the people aren't paying taxes. But maybe a lot of this is just this, pent-up anxiety that they've had living through what has happened over the last 5 years. Now, Germany and France are the two main powers, and, the door is still open, for a deal to save Greece from plunging into into economic turmoil and ultimately having to get out of the euro. So, and if they got out, and you do have a country that is, on the edge, so to speak, what happened 5 years ago is certainly different than what's happening today. Spain, Portugal, Italy, they're the countries, those economies have firmed up, significantly over the last several years. So, remember we always talked about that contagion?
Yes.
And if you look at what happened yesterday in the U.S. domestic equity markets, I think that was sort of proof that we here domestically are going to weather the storm, and it doesn't really matter what the results are, coming out of Greece at this point in time. In a perfect world, you want the meeting to go right, you want the terms to be acceptable, but I'm not quite certain, Harry, that that's going to happen. Because
do you think it's possible that there could be a stopgap type of measure where, we see this in our own government where some short-term funding mechanism might be put in place while they work a permanent solution?
Look, anything is possible, Harry, and I think you have to be able to, do you make a decision as one of those 18, one of those 18 leaders, particularly Germany?
I was just going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. Angela Merkel is. I don't want to say this in an unflattering way. She's the big dog. She controls this thing.
Well, look, the Greek prime minister has to come with some very, very convincing proposals, Harry. Because they came in and said, "Look, we're not good with these increase in taxes. We're not good with the spending cuts. We're not good with pension and labor reforms." And all of those issues were on the table before that $240 billion euro bailout expired last week. So, are we just or is Greece just, marking time at this point in time?
Well, here's what I think. I think in particular, Angela Merkel took the position because they wanted to negotiate before the referendum question. But I think it was very, very smart politics. They knew how the referendum question was going to go, the European Union. They knew that the people would vote it down, and then they would be crippled. They would be down to a few days' worth of cash, and then they strike and they get their deal. I think it's a good play, and I think it's going to work.
Well, look, I think that they absolutely have to convince, Merkel at this point in time and other lenders to basically kick that can down the road. Come back to the to the IMF and say, look, here is our plan, and here's what we think here's what we're going to attempt to do to pay down some of this outstanding debt that they have. And Harry, unfortunately, when you look at the debt to income ratio, kind of like we always talk about with Brother Bill with mortgages, if you have a 25% unemployment rate and 90% of the people are not paying taxes, where's the revenue coming from?
Touche. Are we in a bad way now where no one wants to pay their debt anymore? It's almost like they don't believe they want it forgiven. It's like they don't owe it. That's what I think. I think we have a real problem.
I think, Harry, you're absolutely correct about that, and because if you file here, in the U.S., it's not such a bad thing. The old adage where your credit gets wrecked and so many years before you get your credit report back and to where it needs to be. I just think, unfortunately, and you're seeing it here now, as Carlo mentioned over the last hour, the number of foreclosures, the number of zombie houses, so to speak, that are out there, and there's just so many people unfortunately they have to walk away because they've exhausted all their resources. They've exhausted their unemployment. And
it's so sad. I mean, businesses are actually creating these divisions for all these short sales and all these, as you say, for anybody who doesn't know, a zombie home is someone that is so exasperated, so upside down, they literally drop the keys and they walk the heck out and they just leave the property. And that hurts everybody. That hurts your neighborhood. That hurts, the values of the homes. It is just a very, very bad situation. And I know we're talking nationally at the moment, but we touched on this last hour. We're the highest unemployment rate in America, Atlantic County, and we have the highest numbers of these foreclosure and short sale situations. That's an achievement. You don't want that to be you. I don't know what the answer is, Chuck, how we get out of it, but very challenging.
No, absolutely, and I think that Carlo raised a number of good points over the last hour, and you need both sides of the political table, so to speak, to get together and say, look, are we truly interested in saving Atlantic City and saving Atlantic County?
We say we are, but are we?
But if you look at...
But then, we have actors that are working against us that want casinos in North Jersey. We want to save Atlantic City, but we have people want to compete against us. It's a mess.
Very challenging times. There's no doubt about it.
That's why I'm telling people, look for August 3rd, because I believe we're going to get there without a referendum question on the ballot. If we get to August 3rd into August 4th, then we know that they cannot bring this up probably until next year, because I don't think they would do it in a special election. I think they would wait till the general election.
I agree with you, Harry. I think that August 3rd, the timeline is very, very short.
And then would you want that in the year of a presidential election? I mean,
I think I'd probably push that off, actually.
But then you're talking 2 years down the road.
And the good news is, for Atlantic City, it gives all of us an opportunity to hopefully right the ship.
And this is why I say to anybody out there, and obviously one is a state leader, and it's a shameful comment, this thing that it's inevitable. Nothing is inevitable if you're willing to fight for what you believe in. See, I believe kicking the can, when you're kicking it with debt and all that, that's a bad thing. But stopping that question from getting on the ballot is, to me, a very good thing. And if we can stop it once, that means we can hopefully stop it twice. And if Atlantic City completely turns things around, maybe we stop it for good.
Harry, I think the end of your last statement, if Atlantic City turns it around.
Which I'm expecting is the case.
I understand last weekend was just explosive.
Booming.
In town.
Booming.
Which is great. And now you're literally into the summer season. And as I sat back as we started the show this morning, I can't believe it's the beginning of July, and everything that is happening here, especially, internationally, usually, there's been absolutely, Harry, think about it, there's been no discussion at all regarding second quarter earnings. And second quarter earnings are so terribly important with respect to the market because we focused on Greece, China all into itself, which has virtually gotten no attention. There were a lot of the restraints were taken off in the beginning of the year. The Chinese market, basically took off like a rocket ship. And because it was in despair for 5-6 years, it went absolutely nowhere. The Chinese market, as you know it today, is mostly individual investors, not institutional investors. So what had happened was, if you remember way back when, the frenzy that we had in the casino world, where everybody needed to get onto the train, so to speak, and buy the casino stocks, the same thing was happening in China. So now you have a lot of individual investors being able to buy positions on margin. The stock market took off, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and now all of a sudden, the opposite has happened, where the market is sold off significantly, and even in spite of that, it is year to date the best performing equity market internationally. But on the flip side, what is happening is that brokerage houses in China are now supporting the market. They can buy securities. They cannot sell securities. So that, yesterday, if you look at what the Chinese government put in place over the weekend, that market was up 8% on the open. And then that, what they put in place sort of fizzled. The market was up about 2% for the day. Year to date, still performing better than others, but it's something, it's a market that, here in the U.S. domestic investors need to, I think very, very much we need to stay away from. It's kind of like trying to catch a falling knife, and the returns,
you don't always catch the handle.
Well, the returns look very attractive, but if you understand how they got there, and it's like you don't want to be the last one, getting off of the Titanic, so to speak. And I would be very, very careful in looking. I mean, we always talked about international, and there's a way to buy international. That's one marketplace that I think is a little too hot at this point in time.
Brief timeout. We're going to come right back. He is Chuck Malamut, the official financial advisor to Hurley in the Morning in our 25th year together. To reach Chuck and his great team at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, put this in your Rolodex, 609-383-2010, and watch Chuck show you his perfected concept of total asset management with that all-important asset allocation. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us. We're back 35 minutes past the hour, 10 minutes with Chuck Malamut, our official financial advisor here on the Hurley in the Morning program, exclusive official financial advisor. Chuck, because we got obviously dominated by, and like we should, was something that is that relevant. Are there more items that you'd like to share?
Well, Harry, I think that what a lot of us weren't really paying attention to over the last couple of days is the price of oil. And if you take a look at everything that has happened, basically, in China and in Greece, that oil prices were down anywhere from 8 to 10%, Harry, over the last several days. And one of the items that we have all talked about during Q1, which was negative 0.2% GDP, was the fact that oil moved down significantly from where it was a year ago. The consumer did not take that tax break, so to speak, and spend it. And we're not quite certain what happened in the second quarter because we're waiting now anxiously for earnings to start. And the question at hand is, with these lower oil prices, is the consumer going to go and spend like they did last year? Because if you look at the U.S. equity markets year to date, going into yesterday, which is basically a non-event, the markets are pretty much flat for year to date, somewhat down. The Nasdaq has done better of the three marketplaces. We're the best performer. International equities, even in spite of everything that's happened in China and Greece, is that international markets have outperformed domestic U.S. So now we sit back, and usually at this time of the month, you would have heard, or this time of the quarter, you would have heard the reports coming. Well, the number one or the first company report is going to be Alcoa, and they're going to come with earnings, and earnings are coming at a certain time, certain date. We have not heard a whisper of that, and maybe we got a little sidetracked. Excuse me, because of the holiday. That's potentially what could have happened, but we need to take and we need to be very, very concerned, I think, about our second quarter tampered down earnings going to be what was expected, what was projected. And, if we get through the second quarter and the earnings are good, I think it's going to certainly help, the U.S. markets because, as I said a few minutes ago, investors are a little anxious right now because when they're getting their June statements, they've seen very little growth year to date.
How come things that normally would be front and center are not? Other things are just overshadowing them, or?
I think, Harry, because of the news flow that has come from Greece, the news flow that has come from China, the fact that Puerto Rico got absolutely only a little bit of attention. You talk about a country, or not a country, isn't Puerto Rico one of our 57 states?
It's possession.
Okay, but
I asked you before, how come that's not as important as Greece?
Well, it is very important.
So if Greece gets fixed or we kick the can, that'll be the appearance that Greece is fixed. Then Puerto Rico is important again.
Well, July, Harry, look, January and July, or January 1, July 1 are big dates, big days in the municipal market world. That a lot of bonds mature either the 1st of January or 1st of July, and a lot of fixed income securities also make their interest payments on, they pay semi-annually. So if you have a bond that's going to mature on July 1, 2018, that bond is going to make an interest payment January 1 and July 1. Puerto Rico, at the last minute, was able to renegotiate some terms, make those payments, and, keep the wolves at bay, so to speak. Certainly what is happening in Puerto Rico is not unlike what has happened in some parts of our country, albeit Detroit, as Carlo mentioned, earlier this morning. Atlantic City really bankrupt? But no one is admitting to it. So, Puerto Rico got
speaking about Atlantic City is bankrupt, but nobody's admitting to it. How about the fact, and I forget the exact number that's involved here, are you aware, Chuck, and I know a lot of our listeners are not aware, that there is a number that's been frozen for many, many weeks in our country, a financial number that we can't go past, in this whole way that we pretend that we're not broke as a nation. There is a number frozen right now, day after day after day after day, and I think it's in the same situation.
No, Harry. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of that.
But it is.
Number.
I'll figure it out. There's a reason I'm distracted. Let me just break this now. An impeccable source has confirmed to Hurley in the Morning that a police officer in Atlantic City, and I don't know to what extent. I'm not implicating a police officer in a negative way, so do not misconstrue this. But the way it's reported to me is that an officer is involved in a shooting in Atlantic City. Multiple people have been shot. So there is a police incident. Interesting, we were just talking about safe versus perception of safe. And I now know exactly where the shooting has taken place, and I'm going to hold that information for the moment. But our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone that's involved. I don't know any of the details, the provocation of it, anything about it other than there is a shooting in Atlantic City right now, and multiple people have been shot, according to my source. Very, very sad to report that.
It is very sad, Harry, and when you think about the fact that we had chatted briefly about Atlantic City, it's
on the issue of safety.
That sort of media coverage is not going to be a good day.
Oh, no. I guarantee you the national media is going to swarm on Atlantic City. And, when you look at all violent crime statistics, hugely way, way down. Crime statistics in general, way down. If I didn't say violent crime, I meant to say it specifically, violent crime, way, way down. But you get one incident, and they make it look like it's, the OK Corral.
Yeah, unfortunately, because we're still in that negative news cycle that we desperately need to break away from. So, unfortunately, what happened a few minutes ago, I'm guessing, will get center stage attention, and it's something that we need to overcome for sure.
writing my source back right now. Very, very sorry. We usually will not report something without two sources. This is an elected official that I trust when he tells me something that I know that I can go with it. And I'm just writing him a note how sorry I am to hear this news. Terrible. Chuck, closing 2-minute drill. Time is yours.
Well, Harry, look, Alcoa will come fairly soon with earnings, and that will be the start of the second quarter.
Nobody's been doing in those late things or early things where, like, late at night on the day before they fess up to something. Well, we haven't heard any of that going on, so that's you're laughing, but you know what I'm talking about.
Harry, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, there hasn't been a lot of pre-announcements. That's the term.
Well, I'm a layperson.
It's not lurking through the night looking to post it at 12:01 a.m. so nobody sees.
Hey, look, politicians dump stuff on Friday, late, holiday weekends. This kind of news, when companies are going to get busted up, they pre-announce, right?
They typically do, and there hasn't been. I think what has happened. A lot of the analysts have downgraded earnings in advance of the quarter ending in some particular industries. I mean, there are some groups that have done very, very well. As we mentioned before, year to date, healthcare, consumer discretionary, telecommunications. I mean, they are at the forefront. With year to date performance anywhere from 4 to 10% of those respective sectors. Unfortunately, on the other side, utilities are down about 9% because that's a bond equivalent, and as we talked about a few minutes ago, energy is down about 5.5%. So, you have a tale of two cities, so to speak. And as these companies come, and if they come in line, and what we fought through in the first quarter was that we had revenue that was down. Compared to what was anticipated, but they were able to control the expense numbers, and ultimately the earnings per share made it, so to speak. So I think, Harry, in the next 2 weeks we're going to have a really good idea as to where we're going to go into the third quarter here.
The following program segment paid for by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this program are those of Chuck, do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of today's broadcast and are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Chuck, thank you, and we'll see you real soon.
Harry, thanks again for having me. See you next week.
Let me further this breaking news, early in the morning exclusive about the shooting in Atlantic City. Of course, I want to thank my source. It's the reason that we're able to break so many stories that we do, for trusting me as someone that, will be responsible with information such as this. Shootings in Atlantic City. It's at a market. I'm going to say that much for now. I'm very pleased to report that all of the Atlantic City police officers are okay. And I'm going to tell you at the end of the day here, I believe we're going to hear about fantastic police work done. Sad to report, 2 or 3 victims have been shot, and at least one of them is the suspect. So says my source. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't go away. It's Hurley in the Morning, WPG. Talk Radio 1450, South Jersey's talk station.